Today, I want to talk about my top 5 players to look at heading into CWL Vegas. And this was recommended to me by a buddy on Twitter who ended up using the hashtag the Esports Dispatch. So I highly recommend, if you guys haven't already, make sure to do that if you want to continue to be involved in the conversation. So starting off with my 5th person to be looking out for when it comes down to this event is going to be Methods of FaZe Clan. Yes, Methods joins FaZe as their 5th heading into CWL Vegas, adds quite a bit of chemistry, looks like a very solid player, especially after the year that he had in World War II. Comes off probably one of his best seasons, but also one of his most frustrating. He made an incredible return to the top, starting off on Next Threat with some players who you wouldn't have expected to place very well, yet was a rising star on that team, and later joined Rise Nation, was the missing piece. Everyone was talking about Methods could be the missing piece to make this Rise Nation team really be looking like one of the best teams in the entire world. Has a top 3 finish at Birmingham. Not the greatest into Stage 1, but before that, right before those unfortunate placements to a point, he was the Atlanta MVP, wins the tournament, the star of the Rise Nation squad. Within a month period, goes from being MVP of Atlanta to being replaced by someone who was looked upon as better. Slasher joins the team. After that even, Rise Nation goes on to win more championships, while Methods is sitting in the dust waiting to see whether he can get his opportunity again. He joins Team Caliber, places top 6 at Seattle. And then after that event concludes, it's a question of, okay, rumors start to fly. Methods, is he actually on Team Caliber? Obviously the trade happens with Rise and TK. Unfortunately, though, TK didn't seem to even have enough to afford Methods for him to be on that lineup any longer. So he ends up being back on Rise Nation to a point, traded to Optic Gaming, but it wasn't Optic who necessarily wanted him to be added to the roster. Optic was looking at him as a piece that they could move to get someone else. OG, later after a few attempted roster moves, looks toward him and joins Optic after Karma is dropped for undisclosed reasons. Is he retiring? Is he off the team fully? Is Karma done? Is his career over? Is the GOAT's career over? Formal's dropped. What's the reasoning for this? Why is Formal off the team? He wasn't working hard enough? What's this information? Essentially, Methods was wrapped up in the madness that was the end of the OG dynasty. And so he joins Optic Gaming as not being the number 1 choice, essentially being one of the last choices that they had, and joins after the dynasty has concluded. So the pressure was at an all-time high at this point, right? He was wrapped up in absolutely everything. And you were essentially the missing piece in this case. Like we were talking about, could he be the missing piece for Rise Nation? A month later, almost, joins Optic Gaming, and you are the replacement for the most successful dynasty in Call of Duty Esports history. You are that piece, and you weren't even the first option. Later, events go by, top 6, top 8, and now it's time for champs. You're playing well. You're playing great, right? You're representing the defending champions from last year after a crazy start to a point, and he's probably thinking in his mind, I can't wait to get to that main stage. I can't wait to prove myself as a player who can be on this organization and represent the Green Wall valiantly. And then, we see champs take place, and you don't even make it out of groups. Optic doesn't even get to see the main stage after placing first last year in Infinite Warfare, after winning the championship, after completing one of the craziest moments in Call of Duty Esports history, the biggest storyline of all time. How do they summarize the next season? By not getting out of groups. They finish in top 24 for their worst placement in the organization's history. It rounds out Scump and Crim6's worst season, along with, you could argue, Formal and Karma's ahead of that time. And on the grandest stage of them all, this occurs. And you are looked at as responsible for this situation. You are looked at as the reason why the outcome occurs, especially to the fans on Twitter. Method started off the year with a bang, then later was added to try and pick up the pieces for a team that was still recovering after a broken season. And after that as well, after still playing well in Method's regard, by the way, the replacements are released, saying thanks for the help, but here's the door. Methods comes into Black Ops 4 after a shaky champs doing his best, but unfortunately it wasn't good enough, apparently, and now joins FaZe Clan. A roster that has chemistry, a roster that he's comfortable with, and a team that he feels like he can prove himself on as still one of the best players in the game, because he was, right? Regarding stats, if you look it up, one of the best players last season, and that isn't even in question. And now this team essentially makes sense, at least in my opinion, as far as roles are considered. They are my sleeper team for this event, not only just because of the way the roles work on this team, but because of a motivated methods. After the placements that he's had, after all the pressure of, like I said, joining Rise Nation gets dropped because apparently he wasn't the right player. After winning MVP at Atlanta, joins CODGamepedia. Could he bring back the dynasty? Can he try to help the biggest organization in Call of Duty history recover? Replaced again. And now he's on FaZe Clan after all of those results last season toward the end. And how will we see him recover? Method's story, to me, was by far one of the most interesting of the entire season. One of the most interesting ones to watch throughout the entire year. And it's unfortunate the way that it did come to a close. But now it's his time to recover. Now it's his time to show that it's not just a one-title type thing. It can be done in Black Ops 4. Now, speaking of 4, let's move on to our 4th place position. Another player that I'm very interested to watch heading into CWL Vegas is going to be Loony of Splice. Loony's story is much different. He had a very successful year for Rise Nation, finished with 3 championships under the organization, and was pretty much the in-game leader, one of the main pieces for one of the scariest rosters in the entire title. Unfortunately, his season does end the same way that Methods did. A short placement at Champs. Top 16 for Rise Nation after playing incredibly solid, winning multiple championships, and even there were rumors echoing of could this even be a dynasty-like roster if they decided to stick together moving into the next title. Obviously not the case. The offseason begins after a very slow Champs placement. In overtime, Rise Nation starts to lose piece by piece the roster that they had worked so hard to put together. TJ joins the rebuilding CODGamepedia squad. Gunless moves to the powerhouse in LG, and Slasher, the biggest piece of them all in some cases, joins the hottest org right now in the entire world in 100 Thieves. And essentially for Loony, he watches the organization that he's been helped building since 2016. The beginning of Black Ops 3, he watches the organization that he's helped develop crumble under missing pieces, under the loss of all these players. And he's later added to Splice ahead of the Black Ops 4 season, where he joins Aqua, Temp, Jerd, and Accuracy. All solid players in their own regard, but my biggest thing about this Splice roster is how are they going to work together? The placements have been great online, right? Their placements have looked very, very solid. There are many teams sleeper pick coming into this event, and I would totally understand that by everyone's estimates. But this is a team, to anyone's standards, that is going to struggle as far as the in-game communication is considered. And to me, if Loony can continue, right, not after just one event, but after this event and moving forward, if he can keep these pieces together, realize and take notice of the talent that he has, and can bring them all together to be a championship contender, that would be one of the most impressive performances by any in-game leader, by any captain of any organization that I think we might have almost ever seen. And I say almost as in it might be, it could be, because the pieces have to fall in order once this run could be ending. But I think he has a big pressure of trying to represent the IGL with a team who is a handful to lead, and I think it's going to be really interesting to watch how this Splice team moves forward, because if Loony essentially can't corral the group, can't bring them together, we could be seeing Splice in a very unfortunate placement at the very first event of the year. Moving on to my 3rd spot, we've got Mr. Abezy from E-United, now the face of Call of Duty's 2nd favorite franchise, and that is supported by Reddit. If you didn't get a chance, make sure to check out that Reddit post. It's on my Twitter as well. Abezy essentially joins this team after a very quick come-up in World War II. I remember actually commentating over him toward the beginning of this season, before he was actually on a team known as Wildcard, where he was playing with guys like Tupac Thug Lord, playing with players who were essentially S&D stars. And he was proving himself, and it was very evident, at least to my standards, that he was a top-tier player, but I had no idea the come-up that he would have. And the entire community didn't actually realize how talented of a player he was, apparently, after World War II was over. But the pro teams took notice. The pro teams were all aware of Abezy's progress, and there were many who were bidding, many who were trying to get that contract from Enigma 6, and it was E United who managed to make it happen. They managed to secure him heading into this season. However, the biggest question right now on Abezy, and the reason why I have him in my third spot, is how talented is he? Right? Because the fans don't know that. Like we can look at online results, we can look at the play based on online and say, okay, well, this is here, this is there. But how talented is he actually? And is he ready to help be one of the core pieces to lead one of the biggest organizations in Call of Duty history to potentially a championship? I have him in my second spot in my power rankings. Many have them in the top 3 pretty much. You can see them in the 4th spot from time to time, but they are in that top 5 conversation in pretty much everyone's power rankings. And so to be the main piece, the one position that they were looking to fill up for when we talk about E United's roster moves up to this point, they necessarily always haven't been, toward a Slayer. This is the one Slayer they picked up, right? They picked up JCap, not necessarily for the reason of being a top-tier Slayer. They picked Abezy up for that reason. He's there to find the kills. He's there to increase one of E United's biggest faults over the last few seasons, especially last year, and now moving into this one. It's like I say, you were the pick. You are the difference. And after a very quick come-up like he's had, you grow up pretty fast. And I will say, with this pickup of Abezy, I do like him a lot. I have a lot of confidence in him. I think he is the real deal, and I think he will be able to perform on the biggest stage. Will it happen immediately? I don't know. But I think one thing is for sure is that he's going to have a lot of guidance when it comes down to this team and Clayster and JCap to help you in this opportunity, to help kind of build you up. But when it comes down to getting on that battlefield, and we see how E United's doing, he is going to be the one player that we're looking at, because that is the one big difference that EU has as far as this year is considered, is having Abezy on the lineup and seeing how well he can perform. Another guy who's somewhat new as far as the scene is considered also enters into my number 2 spot. It's going to be Kenny of 100T. The reason why I say new is because essentially World War II was his very first full season as far as competitive is considered. But Kenny, right, of 100T now, in World War II, MVP of the season, the breakout player of the season, rookie of the year, runner-up at champs. Like I said, in his first full year as a competitor, he has all of those titles in one season. It's absolutely incredible. One of the craziest come-ups I think I have ever seen from a player in such a short period of time, to have all of those titles assigned to you after a very short stint under Team Caliber. So, with all of those titles, now comes the pressure. Because now it's a matter of, okay, it was a spectacle last season, but now can it be consistent moving in to Black Ops 4? Was he just a one-title guy? Or is this actually going to be a player to look out for regarding future seasons? Can he keep up the play and remain as the best SMG in the game? Because Lord knows he was last season, and it wasn't even close to an extent. There were arguments of who could be that second, that third spot, but everyone knew Kenny was the MVP, and he made the highlight plays in order to make sure that that was a confident answer in everyone's mouth. So, after last season, we see him leave Team Caliber and joins 100T as one of the marquee players along with Octane and Slasher. And in an interview that I actually had with him leading into this roster and as far as future things are considered, he talked to me and he said, I want this team and I have the future of this team being a dynasty. So he wants to accomplish that. That is on his mind, and they realize that the team that they have in front of them. However, can they make it happen? And because he's going to be one of the 3 main pillars, you could argue maybe even one of the 2 main pillars that they're looking at to help carry that load. And they began this year with a very slow start, right? They're eliminated early in online tournaments. They even turn off the streams because of the negative feedback that they're getting from commenters on their streams saying, what are the arguments about? Why are you guys not placing well? 100T, Nade Shot's new roster has come back to Call of Duty, and this is the team that we have right now. A team who's getting eliminated as early as they are, and we have Kenny, Slasher, and Octane. They turn off the streams, and it's warranted, right? They want to work on their chemistry. They want to work on being a solid team. So there are many questions on 100T, but one of my biggest questions is we know what Slasher can do, right? Slasher has proven himself over the last few seasons. Same thing with Octane. They have been top assault rifle players for years. We know they're consistent. And I feel like Kenny will be consistent as well, but that doesn't eliminate the questions that are probably around his play, as can he keep up the play he did last season? Because we haven't heard much from Kenny, right? I mean, as far as Reddit is considered, as far as Twitter is considered, I haven't hardly seen anything about him. And that could be because of the streams being turned off, no clips to really record or anything along those lines. But one thing is for sure, Kenny does have a lot of pressure coming into this year because, like I said, it was a spectacle last season. But now, as Call of Duty fans, as a community is considered, we are looking at that consistency to see, hey, is this guy going to continue to be the top? Is this guy going to continue to be the best player in the world? And can he be an MVP back-to-back seasons? A lot on the line for Kenny coming into this year. However, he is number 2 on my list. Number 1 is going to be Dashy of Optic Gaming. Now we lead to the main building piece in the new Optic Gaming roster. After all the turmoil that took place, and I kind of referenced it when I was discussing methods especially, but after all the turmoil and essentially the top 24 placement that is still on the minds of all the Optic players and all of the Optic fans, by the way, how do you respond to that? As you are essentially the young gun along with TJ added to this team to see somewhat of a restart, to hit that restart button, and how do you respond after that placement is still there in some instances? And I want to reference to a few of Dashy's stats back from World War II because there was a reason why this guy was one of the main highlight pieces, and some of the pressure that he has coming into the season is based off of these stats. So these are coming from COD stats. We'll have them linked in the description as well of this video. Dashy's overall stats from World War II, and this is compared to everyone, and as far as the rankings are considered for each of those. He was number 3 in Respawn KD, number 1 in S&D KD, number 1 in Respawn Slayer, number 2 in S&D kills per round, number 4 in Hardpoint KD, and number 2 in CTF KD. Stats like that will get you some attention, and there will be many people who will give you negative attention for that, and will be looking for those same stats moving into this year because all the Optic fans, all of the community has seen those stats. They know what those mean, and they say results, and that's what they want for this roster. And he joins this team essentially as a replacement, right? He replaces Methods. He replaces Octane, who are now his competitors. And he replaces Formal, which is a very hard task to try and recover from. It's a hard place to hold. And along with that, he'll be playing against them as, like I said, the replacement. And so whenever you're facing off against FaZe, when you're facing off against Hunter T, LG, who you could argue are some of the biggest competitors in this entire game, when you're facing off against them, they have the fire because they want to prove that you weren't a valuable replacement for them. Methods and Octane, right, they got dropped. They were looked upon as not the right pieces. They were looked upon as not the guys to fix OG. Formal, like I said, there was a lot of hostile moments essentially in that roster as their run did come to an end. Formal wants to prove, hey, OG without me, not a good team. Top 24 placements is what we're going to expect. And that's what Formal wants to an extent. He wants to prove that he was better. He wants to prove that they can no longer be a top team without him. And like I said, he's looked incredible up to this point in regards to Dashy. He's looked phenomenal, constantly being a consistent player. He showed great relations with the rest of the Optic players and looks to be a very valuable piece when it comes down to this team. But when he gets on that main stage and he looks over to his side and he sees 3 of the most incredible players, you could argue, probably on the Mount Rushmore in some people's opinions regarding at least 2 of them, and Crimsix, and Scump, and in Karma, and he starts to hear the crowd rooting on Optic, and he knows the number of thousands of fans that are on Twitter, that are on stream, that are even in the crowd live, all wanting to see how the number 1 offseason pick is going to perform on the biggest organization in Call of Duty Esports today. Will we see what I have deemed personally, and what many have as well, as the next great superstar? Or are we going to see a player who is just filling in the gaps? Big questions on Dashy as of this moment, but fans expect the best. And so far, Optic has given them undefeated runs in tournaments, undefeated runs in series, and a well-oiled machine that looks as if it's been hotter than it ever has. And as the front runner to this offseason, after the worst dip the organization has ever seen, how will he respond to pressure, like I said, of being that replacement? Now, as far as my personal opinions are considered, I think Dashy's going to have a phenomenal season. I think he is that highlight player, but I still even have my doubts as far as how quick is that transition going to occur. I think he works very well with this team. But whenever you get on that main stage, right, and you're no longer looked upon as the underdog, you're looked upon as the team who is always expected to win by the OG standards that have been laid over the last few seasons. The views, the The history that Optic Gaming has is much richer than every other organization that we've ever had. And now you join that team as the front runner to try and rebuild what was the worst season that Optic has ever faced the season prior. Very curious to see how Dashy will perform, and that is, to me, my biggest story, my biggest player to look out for moving into this new title, especially CWL Vegas. But massive thanks to Astronaut Shane on Twitter for recommending this video idea. Massive thanks to him, as he is a watcher of these segments. And if you have some other players you think are ones to be looking out for heading into Vegas, let me know on social media by using the hashtag the Esports Dispatch.